Mike's on. All right, move it over.
Mike's on, we're good? It's getting even brighter. Are we good, Adrian?
We're going.
Oh, okay, great. So thanks for coming, everybody. Sorry about the chaos, but you know, it's a test of endurance. Tonight, next up we have Michael Brooks, who is 22 years in the Air Force, now retired, taking his talent and skills to the streets. So please welcome my ex-colleague and good friend and highly respected friend.
I'm virtual. Okay.
All right.
Go ahead to the next one. All right, so picture this. You and I are in college. We are in class, and we go to this seminar, and they talk about starting our own business. And we're in software development, and we're really excited about it. So we decide that that's what we're going to do. That's our calling in life. We're going to start our own business. Go ahead to the next slide. And so we start to figure out our idea. What is our plan going to be? How are we going to market our services? What are we going to deliver? You know, what is our software going to look like? And we spend day and night. Go ahead to the next one. We spend day and night kind of figuring that out, right? We're spending years now figuring out how to grow our business. And then finally we decided to launch our website. Our friends have graduated. They've gone off to the big companies. They all have real jobs. And you and I, we're really figuring out how to grow this business. Go ahead to the next one. We're working day and night. We're working 18 hours a day. We are struggling, but we are going to make it, right? We are totally focused and totally dedicated to grow our business, our software development business. And we're willing to do whatever it takes. We financially now are running into problems, right? We've gone through all of our money. We have no money. We're about $30,000 in debt to our families, but we have not given up our dream. We're continuing to pursue that day and night, day and night. And then one day something amazing happens, right? We actually start selling stuff, and people want what we're selling. They want our software. So within the first year, we've made 6 figures. We've sold $100,000 worth of stuff. We are excited. By year 2, we're millionaires. We've sold $1 million worth of stuff. Go ahead to the next one. By year 3, we're projected to sell 2 to 3 million. We are super excited. Go ahead to the next one. And then something unfortunate happens. We have a problem, and I come to you one day and I say, hey, our computer systems are down. Nobody can access anything. We can't fill any orders. What is going on? Do you know? And you're like, go to the next one. We're going to pause the story right there. Go ahead to the next one. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the virtual CISO, or the virtual Chief Information Security Officer, and where that might be a good fit for a particular business. As Lori mentioned, I'm a retired Air Force. I did 22 years. I was enlisted, then I got my commission. I wore the CIO hat. I wore the CISO hat for the Air Force. I've been in the Department of Defense for 20-something years. Worked at NSA. Also have some time in the private sector. Worked for PwC and did a little bit of work for Amgen. Now I've started my own business, and I'm helping small and medium-sized businesses try to figure out the security challenges that they're faced with, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the presentation. So a virtual CISO, what is that, right? Is that somebody that just Skypes into a board meeting? Is it somebody that doesn't show up to work? What is that really all about? And I think the biggest takeaway for us to understand and try to realize how can we use this, it's really a leadership solution to a business problem, right? It's taking a particular challenge that a business is faced with, in this case, a security challenge, and we're applying a little bit of leadership expertise to that challenge. And so that's really what it's all about. Go ahead to the next one, Lynn. Now, a virtual CISO can wear many hats, can wear all of the hats, can wear some of the hats. It's totally scalable, right? Can be an advisor, can be a strategist, can be a partner, can be a project manager in some cases, can be a governance lead, can do lots of different things for a particular business. And it's all about finding what that right size fit is for that particular business. That's where the virtual CISO really can add a whole lot of value. Now, if I stand up here and I talk to you for half an hour about all of the great things that a virtual CISO can do, that's a little bit like putting the cart before the horse, right? We don't want to really go into the solution without really understanding what that business need or what that requirement is. How are we applying this to meet a business need at the end of the day? And that's really where our focus needs to be when we talk about the challenges that are facing small businesses, mid-sized businesses, local and state government, and also large businesses. It would be a bit like, this is the security tool ecosystem. I think there's 200 products on that. So if we talked for 30 minutes about all of the great things a virtual CISO could do, it would be like grabbing a tool off of this, putting it into our environment, running it, and then figuring out what do we need it for, right? And that's not something we in the security profession would ever do. All right, at least I got to laugh. That was what I was hoping for. So when we talk about virtual CISO, when we talk about information security, when we talk about cyber security, it boils down to three core elements, right? This is where our value proposition is as security professionals. So it's understanding the threats, it's understanding the vulnerabilities, and it's understanding the risk to that particular business or that particular scenario. That's where we can apply our expertise and generate value for the business. So we're going to go into a little bit of a requirements kind of discussion here when we talk about threats, right? And this is to create a shared understanding for us. So a threat can come in many forms. Can be a person, right? This can be a malicious actor. This can be a hacker. This can be somebody that's trying to gain access to systems. It can be an insider threat. It can be a disgruntled employee. It could be somebody that's looking to gain financially by the access that they have to the company information. And it can be just a typical user, right? We've seen that too. A user can be a threat by maybe not practicing the good security practices that they should and putting the business at risk. A threat can also be a particular event. It can be something as simple as clicking on a link, and we know as security professionals how damaging that potentially can be. SANS last year determined that 95% of all attacks on the networks were a result of phishing. Right, so that's a pretty significant event, and that's largely preventable, as we know. So, and then it can also be, go back one real quick, it can also be a circumstance, a flooded data center, hurricane, business continuity, disaster recovery. When those things start to kick in, those have negative security consequences as well. So those, from a threat perspective, are the things that we're looking to mitigate as security professionals. On the vulnerability side, typically we think about patching our systems. We think about vulnerabilities in our code. We think about vulnerabilities in applications, software, hardware. And those are good vulnerabilities. And we have a very good way of identifying those vulnerabilities and providing remediation actions specifically targeted for those vulnerabilities. A vulnerability is a weakness, right? It's a weakness in our defense, essentially. And so that's one way we generate a lot of reporting, and internally we always know kind of where our vulnerabilities are. But I want to talk about a different vulnerability, and go to the next slide. This is this came from the ISC Squared Cybersecurity Workforce Study in 2018. So one of the major vulnerabilities in our industry right now is just the lack of people, right? This is referred to as the skills gap or the skills challenge. So ISC Squared went out, they do this survey every year. Last year they interviewed 1,500 security professionals globally, and they determined that roughly there's about 3 million open positions right now across the global economy for security professionals. Looking at the numbers, there's about 500,000 in North America, about 135, 140 in Latin America and Europe, and then the number really jumps up to over 2 million in the Pacific, right? So that kind of indicates how digitally aware these folks are, right? Where the need is from a business perspective, right? Almost 4 times as much as we have. Now, maybe we have more people, but again, this is a vulnerability in terms of our overall defense. And of the 1,500 people that were interviewed, 63% said they need more staff, and 59%, almost 2/3, said that the company is at risk, presently at risk because of their security posture. If we look at some specific risks to business, okay, so this is understanding from a business perspective, and again, a virtual CISO is not a business solution to a security problem, it's a security solution to a business problem. And that's the way that we need to think about it. The average cost of a cyber breach is around $4 million. That was from Ponemon Institute in 2017. From a small business perspective, it's averaged about $690,000 is what it costs to recover from a breach. It can be fairly significant. Yahoo was fined $35 million back in 2014 for just failing to disclose their breach properly, right? So they had to deal with the breach, they had to deal with all of the actions that went along with it, and then they got fined for not properly disclosing it. So that can be a pretty huge issue. Email compromise, we talked about the phishing earlier. That's roughly estimated to be about $9 billion last year. And the cybercrime economy generates $1.5 trillion annually. So that's 11 zeros. If you said the average security professional salary is $100,000, that would be 15 million people you could pay. That's how large the cybercrime economy is. In addition to the financial risks, there's also regulatory and brand risks as well, right? 20% of customers stop doing business with a particular company following a breach. GDPR, I think we're just now starting to understand and realize what the potential impacts and the potential risks are there to different companies. We saw Google get fined about 57, I think it was 50 million euro, $57 million. They're I think the first major company to deal with that. There will be others. New York Department of Financial Services has a new cybersecurity regulation. Some of you are probably familiar with that. Part of that regulation is looking to hold individuals accountable, liable for breaches, people in the security profession. So that can be fairly significant. The most important thing that I've said today is the last bullet on this slide, right? 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months of some sort of cyber breach or some sort of cyber event. So that's almost 2/3 of businesses that go within 6 months their doors are closed because they had a cyber breach, and that's specifically small businesses. So that discussion was just to kind of set the table for how can a vCISO help? How can a virtual CISO help, right? So that was just an understanding of the environment. Hey, what are the threats? What are the vulnerabilities? What are the risks to business? So now we'll go into looking at specifically how might a virtual CISO be able to help some of those businesses in some of those situations. So SMB, what is that? It's not a network protocol in this case. It means small to medium-sized business or small to medium-sized enterprise. It's defined loosely, but it's for a small business, it's less than 100 employees or less than $50 million in revenue. For a mid-sized business, it's less than 1,000 employees and between $50 million and $1 billion worth of revenue. And so from a small business perspective, how might a virtual CISO help? Well, there's a lot of different ways that a virtual Chief Information Security Officer might be able to help. And it's not in the formal way that you would think of a Chief Information Security Officer with a team of 50 people with global responsibility for a global enterprise. It's much more scalable than that. It can be wearing a single hat, it can be wearing multiple hats, it can be wearing all of the hats. It's really dependent on that need of that particular business. One way that a virtual CISO could come in and help is in a specific project base, right? If there's a new software that's being rolled out, or if the company is going through maybe a cloud adoption or a cloud migration, and they're not sure how to move all their data over, or what do they need to do. Maybe they want to become compliant with HIPAA, but they're not sure what the HIPAA requirements are. They're not sure where their gaps are. So you could bring in a security executive, somebody with the leadership ability to understand what those are and develop a plan for that particular business to meet those compliance requirements. Another way that a virtual CISO might be able to come in and help a business is with people, process, and technology realignment. May be able to do an assessment for a small business, and I've worked with a few where I've gone in and said, okay, maybe it's time now to hire a network security engineer, or maybe it's time to leverage an MSP. There's a range of solutions out there. We've identified a gap from a person perspective. We already know there's a 3 million global shortage of security professionals, right? So how do we fulfill this gap? Well, we're going to have to do it with a scalable solution. We're going to have to do it with something that meets the specific need of that business. I can also provide expertise to the executive team of a particular business on investment decisions. If there's going into a different market, perhaps, if they're going to be looking at a merger and acquisition, virtual CISO can come in and help that company understand what the risks are associated with those different business ventures from a cost-benefit perspective. But probably the largest benefit that a virtual CISO can provide to a small business or a mid-sized business is really that independent perspective, right? It's that person that can come in and do an honest assessment, that has an unbiased perspective, that can identify where those gaps are, document the current state, and then help that business move towards a better desired state. That works best at the executive level because that's where the buy-in is necessary for this to work. So that's where the virtual CISO fits in the best. And with small business, it's an ideal situation because the need is so vast. And the need is very scalable. It's not, in most cases, businesses don't need a full-time CISO. The average salary right now for a CISO, I think, is somewhere around $250,000. And a particular company may not need a person full-time to be doing that kind of work. So that's where the virtual CISO solution becomes attractive to small and mid-sized companies. It can also help build out core programs, information security programs, governance programs, compliance programs, as I mentioned earlier, whether it's GDPR, HIPAA, some of the federal, if you want to get into the federal marketplace like FedRAMP and some of those other compliance programs. So it can really help to build out those kinds of programs. The cost savings is estimated at about a third. So they say it's roughly a third the cost, and that's not because it's lower quality or it's a cheaper option. Again, it's about the application of the solution. So it's much more scalable in the sense that you can do it almost on an on-demand basis.
So you're saying it might cost the company $70,000, let's say, for a virtual CISO?
It could, based on need. I mean, they might say, we just need you to build this program and then check in on us quarterly, right? And so, then we could work with the company to say, okay, well, here's your compliance checks. Here's the things that you need to be doing. Send me the reporting. I can analyze the reporting. We can see if things are moving in the right direction. That's much more flexible than being resident inside the business 40 hours a week, In some cases, it's actually required. There needs to be a security executive as part of the company. That's either a regulatory requirement, could be an investor's requirement, or it could be an insurance requirement. So
obviously, your business model is you're going to be a virtual CISO for a lot of companies. Mm-hmm. Company A might shy away from you having access to their data and their processes when you have other clients. So what happens in that case?
Yeah, I think.
Can you repeat the question?
His question was, what do you do when you're working with multiple companies and you have access to multiple data? I haven't personally run into that problem. I know there's other virtual CISOs in the audience. I don't know if they want to share if they've run into that particular issue.
So where we've done that, we have an existing client, and we have some other things that be a competitor or someone that they might have a conflict of interest, right? Since they're already the incumbent, already paying us, then we'll run it by them. If they say no, then that's the business. I'm doing this specifically for qualifying companies in that particular case.
Yep.
You kind of don't bite the hand that's already feeding you.
What's that?
You don't bite the hand that's already feeding you.
No, and I think, go ahead. Did you?
And what I've found is I have wound up siloing customers, and then there's other virtual CISOs I know. So if there is a conflict with me because of a specific client, then, but I have never had a client that would not provide me the information to actually provide the service. And I would actually have to turn them down if they didn't provide the information, because I don't want to go as a CISO if I don't have the information to exactly.
Yeah, great points. Both great points. And I think that's where you see the value in the scalability, right? That's where you see the flexibility of the option to be able to apply it to a particular business case, or tap into a network to say, hey, I might not be able to help you out in this case, but I know that Lori can, I know that Ken can, I know that Bill might be able to help you.
And while yes, there's some danger across pollination, there's also a lot of benefits for being able to see the solutions work in other places and be able to apply those
incentivize operations and let your clients, mention names, do this.
Right, gotcha. Or is this tripping points that we've stumbled on, or this is how we avoided them?
It's very similar to like audit professionals. Rarely do you see, limitations because a CPA firm is also the auditor for another competitor.
Yeah. Yep. And, my experience has been, in most cases, we're not really talking about complex things. We're talking about fairly basic practices that just don't exist or have been ignored or, they don't know what they don't know, in a sense. I don't want to oversimplify it, but that's kind of the basic gist of it. Next. So I wanted to just take a quick look, and I know we have a couple of other folks, so please feel free to contribute to the discussion. I just wanted to kind of show you what this looks like, how these services are being packaged and how they're being offered. I did a Google Analytics search, and the virtual CISO first showed up in Google at like 2006, and it's been like... and again, part of it is because of the skills gap. Part of it is because of the skills shortage, right? Part of it is because businesses now are realizing, hey, if we have this event, odds are 60% says we're going to shut our doors in 6 months, and we need to solve these problems. We need to identify solutions. So, but if you can just try to click on that link and then see what happens. You might be pushing the limits of the technology here. Okay, and just scroll down. So you can just kind of see this is somebody's website. This is talking about how a virtual CISO might be used, right? You're talking about doing an MSP check, security assessment, which is fairly typical. Doing a scorecard, threat profile, dark web search, profile analytics, compliance planning. So just to give you a flavor, kind of how people are marketing this, and what they're saying they can do for different businesses. Let's pop out to the next one. Okay, go to the next one. And this is a different one. So they've kind of marketed it as virtual CISO as a service, right? And I think if you go through here, you'll see a lot of the same things: risk assessment, third-party assessment, a cybersecurity assessment. They may call it a maturity model. They could call it, a framework, gizmagabby, who knows, right? But at the end of the day, it's that business issue that we're trying to solve. That's good. Yeah, that's good.
I actually work for that company.
You do? That was just a Google search.
And I'm a virtual CISO.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Go back one real quick. And then if anybody's talked to the Abacode folks, they also have a virtual CISO fractional program. Yeah. Excellent. See? That's great. And again, it's not about stealing business from other folks. It's about we're trying to meet a need. I mean, there's a critical need. And go to the next slide, because we'll get into the so what, right? So when I was in the military, the general always wanted to know, so what? So what? Why are you telling me this? What's the so what? Well, the so what from a small business perspective, there's 28 million small businesses in the United States. 99.7% of all business meets the criteria of small business. They've created 2/3 of the net new jobs in our country since the 70s. Money spent local stays local. We know that. 54% of all sales come from small business, and they employ 57 million Americans. So if that small business has a security issue and they have to close, well, your neighbor may now have lost a job. Your family may have lost their job, right? Now this is going to start to have some real impacts on our daily life. So it can be fairly significant. And again, the types of business challenges that we're dealing with, for the most part, are very solvable and very, very easily identified, to where we can do the things that we do as security professionals: put in an action plan, do an assessment, build a target profile, get them to a desired state. But if we don't do those things, you can kind of see here what the impact is from a small business perspective.
I think I will agree to that. I don't know if most people realize, but the number of publicly traded companies is actually getting much smaller.
Yeah.
Mergers and acquisitions and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's something else that, if it's Bank of America-sized companies, it's more from smaller businesses. I think that's one of the things sometimes it gets lost in translation.
Yeah, right. I mean, and if you looked at the panel that was up here, I mean, what an awesome panel, what an accomplished group. So, I mean, those companies are fortunate to have, to be able to afford people like that. But you know what? They're struggling too. The large companies are struggling just as much as the small companies are, and the small companies really don't have anybody because they can't afford it. You know, and so again, coming at it from a business solution perspective, that's where the value is. Let's click this and see if it plays. It's a little grainy, but it's you should be able to just click on the embedded video there. Hopefully it plays. The audio plays. Okay, this is good.
Protection, whether it's virus software out there, firewalls, VPNs, you know, I don't want. Not only because it's proven, but because something's required by the state.
They're also part of a county-wide network that links the sheriff's department with 4 town police departments, so they can easily share information. But when someone opened an email attachment last month, the whole system was taken over by a virus called Megacode.
It takes your data and scribbles it off, releases it as an encryption virus.
At all 5 departments, all their data and files basically became unusable. Their systems held hostage for money.
And then they ask for, they give you the code to unencrypt it for a nominal fee. In this case, which quite frankly is not a comfortable position for a law enforcement officer to be in.
The police and sheriff's department say their computer consultants tried everything to unlock the data but couldn't do it. Finally, they had no choice but to pay the ransom, a little over $300 through Bitcoin, that finally ended up in a Swiss bank.
$300?
They could have got 300,000 probably.
Millions.
About paying it.
They spend more money on getting people to look at it.
The point is they paid.
Yeah, but the only thing is, that's the first time I should get it.
You don't like to give in something like that.
Brackett says they worked with the FBI to track the money as best they could, but so far haven't been able to get past the Swiss bank accounts. Both departments have now reinforced their computer systems and backups and reminded everyone to be careful.
If it's suspicious and you don't understand where it's coming from, don't open it. Definitely don't download it. You download it, you'll have control of your computer, and it's very costly.
Because if computer crooks can fight the police, they can apparently fight anyone. In Wisconsin, Don Kelly used it.
Okay, so did anyone know that police departments are actually paying ransom on ransomware? Like, that was totally new to me.
There was a short time that the FBI committed that. Very short time. I'm shocked it's only 3
Crazy, right? Crazy. Go back one real quick. So, you know, from a virtual CISO perspective, you can go into a local government, to a tribal government, to a state government, and provide the same level of service that you're providing to a small and mid-sized company.
What are the expected backups?
I don't know the particulars of their situation. Probably. I mean,
So the frequency of your backup, maybe you're not in a position where you can lose 24 hours a day.
yeah. I mean, certainly there are preventative measures here that could have been taken to prevent this. You know, the particulars, I'd have to look into it. Okay, yeah, so let's go to the next. And so from a large company perspective, the virtual CISO option is also a potentially good option. I just had a company reach out to me last week, Fortune 500 company. They're looking to hire a CISO. They don't really have anybody right now. They're in a gaps type scenario, and they're interested in, can you bridge the gap? Can you bridge the gap for us till we can actually hire a permanent person? And that's a really good solution, because not only can I come in from an independent perspective, or can some of these other virtual CISOs come in from an independent perspective? We kind of know what right looks like. We can kind of build out that program. We can also be part of the hiring if they want us to be, right? We can screen resumes. We can do those kinds of things so that when we turn it over, we're turning it over in a warm state. We're not turning over to the director of IT and say, okay, hey, guess what? Now you're dual-hatted as the CISO. Go build a security program while you do your day-to-day IT job. which is extremely challenging for large companies. They can also come in from a virtual CISO perspective and help on specific initiatives. It could be a large digital transformation initiative where they don't have the leadership internally to run the program or to run the project, and some of these are multi-million-dollar projects that have to get done on very short timelines, and it's difficult for companies to manage that transformation initiative with their day-to-day. It's an independent perspective. So again, just like an assessment, instead of bringing in an auditing team or a consultant team, right, that's going to bring in 10 people and they're going to look through your documentation, this is actually a security leader, somebody that's sat in the seat, somebody that understands from a business side what needs to happen and can offer that independent perspective back on how you're really doing, where those risks are, and the threats and the vulnerabilities like we talked about earlier. Reporting is always an issue, so this is something else that virtual CISO might be able to help a company with. 15% of boards think are completely satisfied with their level of cybersecurity reporting, completely satisfied. And I would argue it's not that hard. Are we secure or are we not? I just want to see this. If I'm the CEO, where are we at risk? And what do we need to do about it? Those are the kinds of things that I want to know. And sometimes in the security world, we get lost into the other side, right? We get lost into the SQL injection and, and it's like, so what? What does that mean in terms of the business? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're there to do. We're there to support the business. Okay, so the bottom line here is, from a CISO perspective, very difficult job, right? And it's kind of been an evolving job. I had a mentor tell me one time, don't ever be the first CISO of a company, right? That's not a good idea. But really, truthfully, there's a lot of different things that are going on, right? It's everything from identity and access management to the network security to incident response to compliance to third-party risk. To large transformation initiatives, cloud migration, unmanaged devices. How are we going to manage all this data? When I was managing a DLP program, we literally got an email from somebody that the subject line said, "You people are driving me nuts!" Exclamation point! 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 I mean, that's kind of the perspective that's coming. And this was a junior level person in the company who was trying to do something that wasn't permitted, right? Because it was going to put the company at risk, and just couldn't get it. You people are driving me nuts. So it's like you're plotting against me to make my job harder. It's like, actually, no, I'm trying to protect the company here. So a virtual CISO can come into a small business, can come into a medium-sized business, can come into a local, state government, even a large company. Wear one of these hats, wear a half of one of these hats, wear all these hats. Again, totally scalable to whatever that business need is. Okay? So it's really about, I kind of hit this a few times, it's about the Goldilocks solution. It's really what we're looking for. It's that just right solution for the business where you're applying the security expertise to drive risk down or inform decisions on how you can drive risk down. That's really what it's all about at the end of the day. And doing that for small and mid-sized companies, I found that to be particularly rewarding because you're having an actual impact. And again, the need is there. And it's not a complex problem set when you start to look at it and peel it apart. And people are so receptive to it because that's what we as security professionals can bring into the business. Really, we're helping to mitigate a pretty substantial threat. Hacking the Hacker is a good book. It's an ISC squared book. I just paid my dues, but if you read the book, it's a really good, kind of a quick read. It's a basic read, but good quote in there about the defenders. Our cyber defenders, the folks that are doing the real work on a day-to-day basis, they got to be just as smart as the hackers and stay a step ahead of them. So in most cases, these are pretty smart folks that are doing this work. So we should remember that why as we're doing our work, especially the folks that are doing the real work to keep the data flowing and to keep it secure. So some quick takeaways. Virtual CISO, it's an option. It's not the option. It's totally scalable. It's kind of like telemedicine, right? We had a doctor's gap back in maybe a few years ago. There weren't enough doctors. And then people started seeing seeing their doctors on webcams. And that was kind of interesting. Like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. And now it's mainstream. You can just go onto your app. You can see your doctor. And, in 2 minutes, you can get a prescription, 5 minutes. You never have to go to his office. And, it's you don't have to sit in the waiting room for 35 minutes, to see them for 2 minutes. So virtual CISO is kind of like that. If you wanted to compare it to something, it's about that availability and that scalability. It's a right-sized model to offset the skills gap, works across pretty much the spectrum of business. And again, it's not a security solution, it's a business solution. Next. NIST, I love NIST. They have a lot of great resources for small business. So if you're working with small business or a mid-sized business, they've got guides specifically on fundamentals for small business. They've got a whole page of resources for small and mid-sized businesses targeted directly for them to help them, with this problem set. So those are some very good resources. Happy to share those after as well if you need them. Okay, back to our story.
I'll add, I'm a PCIP, and the North American PCI Council this year really put a lot of emphasis around small businesses. They did a lot of stuff, like little one-pagers on credit card security, because that's where they were getting popped quite a bit. Instead of giving them the entire DSS to try to wade through with 215 controls,
yeah,
they really
right.
The crown version, not to be
yeah.
insulting, but
no, yeah.
There's this guy that
absolutely
makes cupcakes all day.
Yeah.
Something like this, but still wants to take credit cards. I thought it was a huge step in the right direction.
Right.
And I think the SMB market is getting the attention it probably deserves. People are putting products out targeted to them versus as an afterthought and not thinking about enterprise security.
The Better Business Bureau actually has a material for small and medium business as well. They came out with a couple of years ago. They have a whole website, section of their website with all kind of material and whatnot.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, I really do.
If you look at the Center for Internet Security, which now manages critical security controls, they're doing more and more guidelines toward that. They're going to help mitigate and so forth.
Yeah, I like their fundamental controls. I mean, they've kind of boiled it down to 20 fundamental controls. It's like, yeah, I mean, the NIST 853, I think it's 900 pages long, and it's like, you can take these foundational controls and in, 30 minutes know, am I okay, am I bad, am I good? And then you go from there.
So even then people look at that, they don't know what to do with it, so they're actually developing other guides to tie to it, to help you implement it, to help you measure how you're doing it, all that sort of thing. They're adding stuff around it to make it even more useful.
Yeah, and I think, our job as security professionals really is to make that more digestible and more understandable, not harder to understand, right? We need to demystify it. It's not this super cosmic thing. It's risk at the end of the day. It's risk management at the end of the day. All right, so back to our story then. I would have charged a little more, but, hey, that's just me. That's just me. Okay, so I'm like, hey, what's going on? Our business, I can't get no data. Everybody's, we're going to lose we're going to shut our door. What's happening? What is happening? And you're like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I brought in a consultant. They helped us out. We should be good. Everything should be patched. We should be able to recover from this. This is not a problem. And I'm like, oh my God, thank God, because I was really worried about it. I thought we were going to have to go out of business. Go to the next slide. And they're like, no, as a matter of fact, we have enough money now to buy our own private islands.
I like what you think.
And if you, how'd that get in there? How'd that get in there? Sorry about that. Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead to the next one. Whoever you like tomorrow, just eat good. That's all I'll say. How about that? Next slide. I don't know how much time we have, but we've already had a little discussion. We can certainly have 6 minutes.
The other place that I've been slipping in as a virtual CISO is when CISOs are new. So that they can do their strategic work. I'll come in and actually do the training. No, actually, not that. No, and I really don't know everything. But basically, I'll go in a non-threatening way and run things day to day. Because one of the worst things as a new CISO is you go in before you've built those relationships and you break the world. And you never recover from it. So, and then the other thing is when people, CISOs go on vacation.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, because there's just not enough of them, and I think the average tenure right now for the companies that are fortunate enough to have one, it's like 24 to 48 months, and a third of them leave for more money. So as loyal as you think they are, if company A offers them a little bit more, they might be on their way out the door, which is going to put you as the business owner in a pretty tough spot, right? Because now you don't have anybody leading your program. So having other options available to you in whatever those scenarios are, could be a family emergency, could be, oh, he up and left, totally unexpected. How can we mitigate this? So it can be a really good option for that. I would encourage, if you're working with companies or talking with companies about this as a potential option, just make sure they do their research and their due diligence. And certification. There's no real standard, but certifications certainly are a good idea. Maybe even bringing in a virtual CISO to do some consulting to find out, is this person a good fit? Whether it's a senior engineer or somebody as a business leader for that particular company. Next. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm starting my own business, truly. About 6 months into that, I do some stuff on the side, some independent stuff, but I'm trying to form a business around folks that have senior military leadership experience and helping businesses solve problems and win. So some folks that have some tremendous amounts of experience where they can apply that at different levels of the business to help them grow and help them solve problems. And I think as we move well into the next 20 years or so, you're going to see a lot of scalable, flexible kind of work options meeting the needs of the business. I think the traditional employee model is probably going to, over the next, I would say, decade or two, probably phase out to something that just looks like applying solution to need, applying solution to need, applying solution to need. So that's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.